Okay, so yesterday I left you this exercise, which was to find the gradient for each graph, and these are the answers. So if you just pause and mark your work from yesterday, that'd be good. Anything you're not sure about, just email me and I will try and help you. So today's lesson, we're continuing with plotting graphs. Again, we're going to be plotting linear functions such as y equals 2x plus 3, but specifically we're going to recognise the linear function and understand what the 2 means here in front of the x and what the 3 means. So last lesson we talked about the number multiplying the x representing the gradient, but it's only when it's in this form, y equals some x's plus a number. The number in front of the x that's multiplying the x is the gradient. So, first exercise here, for your starter, can you group the following functions into graphs that have the same gradient? So if you pause and have a go at that quickly, write down all the ones that have got the same gradient together, and then we'll have a look at those in a minute. Okay, so you should have had 3 groups. We have this group here that have all got a gradient of 4, this group here which have all got a gradient of 2, and this group here which have all got a gradient of -1. So remember there's a 1 that we don't write in, and it's got a negative in front of it, so it's -1, so gradient of -1. Okay, so these have all got the same gradient, which means they're all parallel. These have all got the same gradient, so that means they're going to be parallel, and these have all got the same gradient, so they are going to be parallel too. So, what I want to do, first of all, we're going to be drawing some more graphs. I'd like you to draw these graphs, so you will need a table for each graph that you're going to draw. And you can use the coordinate axis that you had from yesterday's lesson to draw them out. So if I can pause and okay, so you might not have chosen these numbers for your x values, but just to give you an idea, the points you should be plotting for y equals x. Okay, we're saying the x numbers have to be the same as the y numbers, so you're going to plot -10, -10, -5, -5, 0, 0, 5, 5, 10, 10. Okay, so again, it doesn't matter which numbers you chose here, but what you should have are your pairs of numbers should be the same. Here we're going to look at y equals x plus 1. So we've been a little bit careful here. We're going to start, remember yesterday we said start with the positive numbers because they're easier. So 10 plus 1 will give me 11. And 5 plus 1 is going to give me 6. 0 plus 1 is going to give me 1. Now -5 plus 1 means I'm getting closer to 0, so it's going to be -4, and -10 plus 1 is going to be closer to 0, so it's -9. Now some of these points are not going to fit on your grid. This one is not going to fit on your grid because it only goes up to 10, so if you want to choose another point here, that's fine. You might decide to make your x value 9 and then get the point 9, 10, it's up to you. Okay, but again, choose similar numbers here and work out coordinates for these 3. So if you press pause while you finish that off, this is what you should get. Just make sure some of the ones that are being handed in to me at the moment are not going through all the points they should. And try and keep your lines as thin as possible. So plot the points really carefully and join up through the points. And if you keep your lines as thin as possible, it'll just be more accurate. So what we've got here, we've got y equals x minus 2, y equals x minus 1, y equals x, x plus 1 and x plus 3. So you will see they are parallel. They are all going in the same direction, and that's because they've all got the same gradient, which is come here. The same about each graph is that they've got the same gradient because they're all x plus or x minus something. But what's different? Okay, so have a think. What's different about each graph? So we can see that this graph is higher than this graph, higher than this one, higher than this one, higher than this one. So what's changing in particular is where they are crossing the y-axis here. So this graph here crosses at the number 3. If we look, we get a +3 in the equation. Let's have a look at the next one. This is y equals x plus 1, and it crosses at 1, and I've got a +1 in the equation. Y equals x, well y equals x crosses at 0, and we're not adding anything to it, so it's 0 is what it's going through, 0 is what we're adding, so that works. This one we've got -1, so we would expect it to cross at -1, and it does. Okay, and this has got -2, we'd expect it to cross at -2, and it does. Okay, looks like the negatives here are not very clear, but there are negatives down there. Okay, so something to put in your notes. All the lines have the same gradient, so they're parallel. Where they cross the y-axis, so this bit here, is called the y-intercept. Okay, so that's a key word again that we'll be using, y-intercept. And the number you add to the x gives us the intercept. So we talked about yesterday, the number you multiplied the x by was the gradient. So the number we're adding or subtracting is the y-intercept. So pause and get that copied down. So for these 4 questions here, we're asked to write down the y-intercept of these lines. Now just note again that it's y equals, so it's in the form that we need it to be in. We know this number in front of the x will give us the gradient, but it's the +7 that is the intercept. Okay, so the actual coordinate would be 0, 7, because it's going through the y-axis at 0, 7. So the intercept here would be a half. Oh, done it in the wrong order. The intercept for this one will be -5, and the intercept for this one will be -3/4. Okay, and if you remember, you've got questions similar to that on your 20 questions. So you should now be able to start answering those correctly. Okay, so have a go at these few questions here. You've got to write down where each of these lines cross the y-axis. In other words, write down the y-intercept for those questions. So pause, have a go at that, and we'll mark that in the next lesson. Okay, so for these questions, you're asked to write down the equation of the line. So we've learnt that the equation of the line tells us something about the graph. The number multiplying the x, which we call m, is the gradient, and the number we add to those x's is the y-intercept. So here we're sort of working backwards. We know the gradient and we know the y-intercept, so can you work out the equation? So it's got to start as y equals, okay? Gradient is 3, so that's going to go in front of the x, so it's going to be 3x, and the intercept is 6, so it's going to be +6, and that's it. That's the equation of that first line. So if you could finish those other 6 off, okay, and I will put the answers up. I'll probably put them up tomorrow, even though you don't have a lesson tomorrow, just so you can get your work marked quickly. Okay, all right. I shall speak to you next week.